Sharon, it's so good to see you, and we have so much to talk about.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Of course. So let's start with, what is the Water Resource Research Center?
We've been a center since 1964, since federal legislation established a network of water institutes across the nation to tackle water research issues related to water quantity, quality, and what we really focus on is educating the public and being an outward-facing unit for the University of Arizona, and through our applied research, our educational programs, which include public education as well as student education, and our engagement, we're bridging the university with the communities of Arizona and beyond.
How do you influence water policy?
That's a great question, and it's a sensitive question.
Of course.
Because it's often been pointed out, you're a university professor, you don't make policy, but what we can do is we can gather the information, we can analyze the information, we can share it with the public, with elected officials, so they can understand it better, they have it at their fingertips. So one of our initiatives right now is preparing county fact sheets. What we found out is some of our agencies don't distribute information at the geographic level that people most relate to, including some of our county extension faculty and staff. So we've been working on maps and putting together information so that our own extension personnel and others can share it and people can access it. Arizona's such a fascinating state in terms of its geography, its distribution of water, and also the kind of communities that we have. We have many rural communities. We are home to 22 federally recognized Native nations, and everyone is different. And when it comes to indigenous communities, I had to learn from almost zero knowledge. I grew up in New Jersey, and going through school and whatever, there was never any mention of Native nations and indigenous communities. And indigenous communities and Native nations in Arizona are so important to everything in the state, but especially water. And so what we do at the Water Center is we help educate. People have a thirst for knowledge. They want to learn about indigenous communities, indigenous water, indigenous values, much as I have learned about it. So what we've been able to do, we hosted a conference fully on this in 2021. We have integrated it more and built more of it into our programming, our webinars, and so forth. And we have people regularly thanking us for sponsoring this program on universal access to clean water, where we had a webinar on that, or panels at conferences where I help organize a conference, not indigenous though I may be, I'm the moderator, the speakers are all indigenous. So it's really, I feel so grateful to have the opportunity to do this. I was just in March at the UN Water Conference. We're through our university accreditation. You yourself signed a letter that committed us to further the goals of universal access to clean water and sanitation. We were able to include in our delegation tribal leaders and other people working on tribal issues. And so it's been really a wonderful opportunity, a learning opportunity, and what we're trying to do is help others learn, because we really need to understand each other.
So where do we use water in Arizona? When I got here, I learned about the 5 C's of Arizona, and it seems a lot of the citrus and cotton are being displaced with mega developments with homes, and as our state grows, we've got to have places to build homes. And it seems like it's on agriculture land. You know, we own 2,800 acres in the city of Maricopa, and I'm told that that's a very valuable piece of land, because all the developers come to me and say, you want to sell me that land so I can build a bunch of homes on it? Where do we use water?
So Arizona, as it's grown, the fastest growing user of water has been the municipalities, the communities. And I think if you look years ago, in fact, you can look nowhere else other than Phoenix. If you look at the Salt River Project area, And that was the first large Bureau of Reclamation dam project to take and harness river waters so they wouldn't flood and direct them into the central Phoenix area. Back in the early 1900s, over 90% of the water use in the Salt River Project area was for agriculture. Now over 90% of it is for municipalities.
Right.
So over time, what we've seen is municipal use has grown. On the pie chart, our pie's not gotten much bigger of water
Right.
use. You know, we really are not using more water than we were using 30 years ago or so, maybe even 40 years ago. But the pie slices have changed. Municipal has grown. Agriculture has gotten smaller, but it's still over 70%.
Agriculture.
So it's less of the pie than it was, but it's still a large portion, which is why, as we're dealing with reduced Colorado River flows, using our what we call fossil groundwater that's in the ground, in the aquifers, but it's not being replenished as it's being used. As we look at the challenges to our water supply, we have to look at all the sectors. Industrial is important. You asked the question, where do we use the water? So, you know, we certainly use water to generate electricity. The mines use the water. Certain uses, like even for cattle and dairies, that's actually called industrial
Yes.
use in the state of Arizona. And then we shouldn't forget, although it's not measured carefully, the environment. The environment needs water. We know when you mention the 5 C's of Arizona's economy, certainly our climate and then environment are very important because of tourism and so
Right.
forth. So for our natural systems, but that's not as well quantified as some of the other uses.
So Sharon, you mentioned the Colorado River. It's been all over the news, and there are 7 states that benefit from the water there. Is this sustainable? What is Arizona and all of those states that depend on Colorado River water going to look like 20, 30, 40 years from now?
Well, to really get into the Colorado River, we probably need a whole other meeting.
That's
to
why
do
this
that.
is
So-
this is a
so-
2-hour discussion.
But so the Colorado River is shared by 7 states in the United States, the Republic of Mexico, and within the United States, we have 30 tribal nations that have rights to Colorado River water, some of which are still in dispute. They haven't been quantified. And so we have, it's estimated 40 million people depending on the river to some extent,
Yeah.
you know, not for everything that they do. And this is in the western United States. We've been growing. It's not the only source of water, but what's happening is demand for water is growing. At the same time, the supplies the river system is producing are shrinking. And they're shrinking largely due to, you want to call it long-term drought, you want to call it mega drought, you want to call it aridification, but we see that we're experiencing the driest period of record, the driest 20-plus period on record in 1,200 years.
Wow.
And there's a big difference between 1,200 years ago and now, because now we have 40 million people,
Right.
and so much depending on the river. And so, in a nutshell, I'm going to make it sound like this is a simple statement, but it is the challenge. We have to get back into a new equilibrium. You know, we can't act like the river is producing 16.5 million acre feet, which is kind of what has been allocated, not even counting evaporation, when the river is producing more like 14 or 15, or in recent years, except for this year, which is a banner year for water, more like 12 million acre feet.
Right.
And sometimes the projections are showing it could go down to 9 million acre feet. So what we've done over the past 20 years, with a few good years in there, is we've been pulling our savings. We had water saved up in Lake Mead, so anybody who's been out to Hoover Dam, the storage behind it is Lake Mead. It is the largest surface storage reservoir in the United States when full.
Right.
Now it's about 27% full.
It's amazing.
And it's like people, you know, okay, you might think, all right, I'm going to draw on savings, I need the income, but I'm going to go deposit more in once I get that next paycheck, and then you lose your job. That's the kind of analogy I've been using.
It's a very good analogy.
We keep thinking that we're going to get a good winter, we're going to get a good winter. And over the last 23 years, we've only had a couple. So even with this winter, a question that comes up, is this winter helping? Sure, it's helping. It's not hurting. But it's not enough for us to say, hey, we're out of trouble here. So what we need to do, and I'm optimistic we can do, is we need to adapt. And that means everybody. That means agriculture, that means communities, that means industry. This is truly one of those things we're all in it together. And so much of what is happening with the water community on campus and elsewhere is working on some of these solutions. How do we produce the same amount of food or more with less water? How do we reuse water? Some people don't want to think about reusing treated wastewater, but wastewater is treated to such high standards these days. And how do we use that? Do we use it for agriculture? Do we use it for people? So we're working on solutions. That's what we need to be working on, and everybody needs to be on deck to do the work.